Thank you for accepting the invitation to be present with us today. Evangelization, a very, very big and buzzword. But when it's broken down, it is simply an invitation to share our faith. And one of the ways that we share our faith is by allowing ourselves to risk, to share a bit of our life story with other people so that they can see how Christ entered our life and how he made a change. When people give a testimony, they are not looking for praise, they are not looking for recognition. They follow the simple 3 steps. This was my life, this is how I met Christ, and this is how my life has been since. Tonight we are very privileged to have a young woman who is willing to begin our time together by giving her own personal testimony. Kendra Smith, I've known for many, many, many years, since I was pastor at Blessed Sacrament many years ago. I've known her and her family. I've watched her grow, I've seen her study, I've seen her struggle, and I've seen her succeed. She today is working at Agape, where she reaches out to the poor of our community. Tonight, she reaches out to those who are searching for Christ by sharing her story, so that by sharing it, hopefully, she will allow us the courage to look at our own story. Kendra, would you do us the honor?
As Father said, my name is Kendra, and I'm actually a parishioner here at St. Peter's now. I did grow up at Blessed Sacrament, but I moved away for school and then moved away for work. And when I returned to Cornwall, I found my home here at St. Peter's. I was very blessed to get to know God from a fairly young age. I had a personal encounter with him back when I was in grade 9 at a Journey to the Father weekend conference. And since then, I've been blessed to know God and Jesus as a personal being very present in my life. But even with this, I still sometimes walk away, usually little step by little step, and then I find myself restless and unhappy. So tonight, I just wanted to share a little bit about a particular time in my faith journey, and not necessarily my conversion story, but I just felt called to share about this particular time. So the summer after I graduated from university, both of my roommates got married, and it set me into a little bit of a whirlwind. I had no idea where I was going to live that year, what I was going to do. I had finished my studies and I hadn't really thought forward to what I was going to do afterwards. My step-grandmother became really sick at that time, and while I was in university I worked as a personal care worker, so it just seemed appropriate that I would move to Toronto and take care of her and her time of illness. When she passed away, again, I didn't know what to do with my life. I hadn't thought forward. But I decided I would stay in Toronto, and I looked for work. I felt really lost at that point in my life. I didn't feel any strong desire or any calling to a particular field of work. I had taken some steps away from God, so I really wasn't hearing or feeling him in my life. And I was seeing the lives that my friends were leading. Some of them had gotten married, some of them were in incredible jobs, some of them had continued studies in their masters, and I just felt lost, and that my life was a little bit of a disappointment. At this point, I think I slowly but surely stopped praying altogether. I mean, I kept going to weekly mass. I knew that was an important part of my life, but there was no real personal connection with God. I didn't really spend much time with him, so naturally I didn't really hear his voice of guidance. I kind of, at this point, just decided, well, if you're not going to tell me what to do, and I can't hear you, well, now I'm just going to figure it out on my own. So I fell into a job at Ryerson University, and threw myself into it because I didn't know what else to do. I started as a temp worker, and worked my way up eventually into a full-time job where I stayed for 3 years. I knew right from the get-go this really wasn't where I was supposed to be. But even though I had walked away from God, I felt abandoned by him, and I felt lost. And so I started to become this person that I didn't even really recognize. I stayed in this job because, for all intents and purposes, it was good. Good pay, good benefits, great opportunity for growth and development, but I really didn't feel called to it. I think the biggest mistake that I made when I went to Toronto was I didn't invest in a spiritual life there. I wasn't giving, I wasn't volunteering, I didn't have any spiritual friends that I could really talk to about God. And I wasn't moving forward in my spiritual life, so I was moving backwards. I had this constant oscillation. I was unhappy with the city and with the job and really just didn't feel like myself. But again, like I said, it was a good job, so it was really hard to walk away from. And everyone in my life kept telling me how good it was, how good of an opportunity it was. You need to stay, you need to stay. But I had this nagging feeling. I knew I really needed to make a change, but didn't quite know what to do. So eventually, in the summer of 2011, I reached a point of desperation and finally took it back to God in prayer. Essentially cried out to Him, I have no idea what I'm doing, finally admitted it. What do you want me to do? I'm so unhappy, and I realize it's because I'm not really living, I'm just existing. And I'm not really living because I'm not with you. So, I finally took it to prayer, and felt God saying, yes, you need to make a change, but just not quite yet. Just wait. In my restlessness, I found patience with Him, and in April of 2012, I finally heard God saying, now is the time. Now is the time to leave. So I spoke with my boss, who was incredibly supportive, and gave my notice. Still had no idea where I was going to go or what I was going to do, but I began planning and saving like a mad one. I knew that while I didn't quite see exactly what was up in front of me, I knew that He was guiding me. I knew now that I was called to work in some sort of nonprofit organization or do some sort of social services, some sort of charitable work where I really felt like what I was doing was making a difference. And that I would start looking in Ottawa or Cornwall, someplace closer to home, where my heart felt at home. After I left work, I took a few months off and traveled for a little bit with my sister, for a little bit with a friend, and for the first time in my life, I traveled for a little bit completely on my own. And after these travels, which were completely life-changing and brought me a renewed sense of independence and confidence and love of myself, I came home, spent a few weeks with friends and family, and then felt called to pull that computer out and start looking for work. And literally, the day that I started looking for work, the day that I felt called, now is the time, I saw a job posting for the Agape Center. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt just a sense of excitement and passion, and I knew this was the job that I wanted. So I applied that day. I got a call back that afternoon for an interview. That was a Friday. Had the interview Monday, call back on Wednesday, and started working the following Monday. So right now I work as the volunteer coordinator at the Agape Center, and I absolutely love my job. I love getting up in the morning, I love going to work, I love the people I work for, I love what I do. I love working for an organization that directly affects people and directly helps people. I love working with the incredible volunteers who give their time and their talent so generously. I've always had a passion for social justice and for caring for the vulnerable. And I've learned a lot about nonprofits, and I've been blessed to work with some of the most incredible women leaders who have encouraged me and inspired me and challenged me to reach for more. God knew. All along, God knew. All along, God had a plan. And all I had to do was listen, be open, be patient when He asked me to wait, and be fearless when He asked me to jump, trusting that He had it. So if you want joy, follow Jesus. If I look at my life, I can see this at play. The times I've felt the deepest sense of joy are the times that have been closest to the heart of Christ. The times that I've listened to him and followed his call. The times that have been my darkest times are the times that I've felt most lost, are the times that I've been furthest away from him and his heart. Even though he's proven to me time and time again that he's got this.
We thank you, Kendra, for sharing with us your own hopes, your own journey, and your own joy in being able to listen to the voice that calls you. Tonight we are very privileged to have with us another young man, God, I'm feeling old. A young man who is a father, but in a different sense of the word than I am. He's a married man. Michael comes from Ottawa, where he is involved in ministry as a full-time lay minister. He and his wife are involved in the new evangelization. He has been endorsed by the Archbishop of Ottawa, and he has had the opportunity of speaking throughout Canada, throughout the United States, places in Europe, and places in Africa. So we're really getting someone who knows what they're here to talk about. Michael has studied. He's got degrees coming out of the yin-yang, but we're not interested in that. He happens to be a man who is genuine and a man who is on fire with wanting to share his love for God. And he wants us to share that love. And maybe if we listen carefully during the next 3 days, we may see how we too can share the journey and share the joy. So Michael, that's it. I'm done. You're on.
We were allowed to be happy. I have a friend who was at a conference once, and there was a speaker who said, if you give your heart to Jesus, you'll be as happy as I am. Is that a promise or a threat? My goodness. So I'm actually pretty happy myself, because tonight, Father took me out for dinner to the Schnitzel House. And if the Schnitzel House doesn't make you happy, I don't know what will. It's just wonderful. And when I got there, I decided to eat food, which is usually what we do at a restaurant. We don't eat coal, we don't eat pieces of wood, we don't eat porcupine quills, we generally eat food. Which you're probably saying, well, why is he telling me this? This is something I already know. I hope you know it. It's one of these strange things that when we think we're free to do whatever we want in this world, most of our things are actually pretty limited. You know, even food. 99% of things, if you eat them, you will die. So you don't need to start, I was going to say cardboard or Starbucks coffee cups or arsenic or rocks or coal or leather shoes. You don't need any of that stuff. We have a freedom, but that freedom isn't the type of freedom that the world imagines. It's not the freedom to do whatever we want in any way and everything will always turn out. We have a particular freedom to live in accord with who we are, to live in accord with the way that God made us. See, freedom isn't really the capacity just to do anything in any way and expect great results. True freedom is the capacity to live in accord with nature. And I mean nature in terms of trees and birds and stuff, but I mean it in the deeper sense, in the capacity to live in accord with reality. Like schnitzel is good. That's the truth. Eating coal or any of those other things I mentioned just isn't good. So if we want a good life, if we want a happy life, we start by living in accord with who we are. And one of the most fundamental realities of the human person is that we're made to worship. Dostoevsky, who is a famous Russian author of the 19th century, he had a really interesting line in one of his books. He said, there's no such thing as atheists, only idolaters, and that's what they should be called. I said, what do you mean by that? What he meant was, every person worships. It's just the way we're made. We can't live without worshiping. We can't live without giving our heart over something that we think is greater than us. So he says, people may say they're atheists, but they can't actually live that way. because they give their heart to something, they worship something. If they're not worshiping God, then they're worshiping an idol. Then they're worshiping something less than God. And in fact, worshiping something less than themselves. So when the atheist says, well, I don't worship the Christian God, they're right, they don't worship the Christian God. But if an atheist said, I don't worship at all, they're not right. Because they do worship, because we are made to worship. So the question for us, the question of freedom, it's not a question of whether we will worship or not. It's not a question of whether we will make things in our life more important than ourselves. It's not a question of whether we will give our life to something that we think is great and awesome. That's not the question. Just as it's not the question, will I eat or not? The question is, what will I eat? And therefore the question for us is, what is it that I will worship? And just like with food, how things turn out better when we treat them in accord with what they are. That is, when we eat good food, food that's healthy, food that tastes better, we're generally healthier. When we worship as we're made to worship, our life is transformed. So what I'd like to do over the course of the next couple of nights is I'd like to look at, it's almost like an extended examination of our conscience. It's meant to look at the four things that if we're not fully worshiping God, the Thomas Aquinas says there's four other things we'll worship. Honor, wealth, power, and pleasure. He says those are the four idols. Now, the first thing I want to say is, and this is a really important qualification, I don't want to make it 1,000 times, but I'll mention it a couple times, is that none of those things is bad. Wealth, honor, power, and pleasure, none of them. In fact, they can all be good things. So it's not that having or possessing or any of those is bad. I'm not suggesting that at all. The problem is when we make them into an idol in our life. When they become our primary pursuit. When the energies that we need to be giving to God, we're giving to one of these things. When we make them to be like a little God in our life. And I'm going to show you how, in my life and in all of our lives, we're tempted. It's easy for us to do this. So it's not a matter of rejecting them as if they're some sin in and of themselves. They're not. But it's a right ordering. It's like, so here's my confession. Okay, I'll just kind of put it out there. Father can absolve me afterwards. So this week at the grocery store, Nanaimo bars, there was like some day-old ones on, because nobody likes those, right? I don't know how you could ever have day-old ones and somebody not buy them. So 50% off, so I bought them. So I got them. What I said to my wife was, I just bought these. In case you have company over, I'll just keep them in the freezer, right? Yeah. So there's 4 strips in them, right, with 4 pieces in each. So the next day, the first whole strip is gone. And my wife said, "Where's that?" I'm like, "I have no idea. That's why they're 50% off." She said, next day, boom, second half gone. At that point, I was just putting it in the freezer. Right? And guess how many are left? 2. This morning there was 4 pieces left. And I'm like, okay, I'll have 2 today, and I'll have 2 tomorrow. And that way, Lent comes on Wednesday. Well, I didn't want to risk it that I made it to tomorrow and I couldn't eat the last 2. So I ate 3 of them today. So there's 1 left. 1 of 16. This is not the right ordering of things. Okay? The Nanaimo bars are not evil, they're good. But eating 15 of them? No. Not the right ordering. Okay. So we want to talk about the right ordering of ourselves, of our heart, of our soul, so that we're rightly ordered towards God. So, tonight we're going to do 3 of the 4. We're going to do wealth, honor, and power. And each one I'm going to use a little story from Scripture, and then I'm going to give a little reflection on it. So here we go with number 1. The first one, and this is where we sort of get the theme for the whole retreat, follow me, is Jesus' call to Matthew. So Matthew is a tax collector. He's sitting at his booth one day, Jesus walks by and says, "Hey, follow me." And Matthew just kind of stops what he's doing and follows Jesus, and that's the end. It's the shortest story in Scripture. It's like 12 words long, and that's it. Well, I'd like to, spend a little bit of time kind of reflecting on this. Now, to understand what's happened there, if I could get a glass of water, that would be great, because I'm going to be perched so far. Too many Nanaimo bars are stuck in So it happens really quickly. But the reason it happened so quickly is any Jew that was reading it, which of course that's what the Gospels were originally written for, would understand exactly what's happening. Matthew was a tax collector. Now we know nobody likes tax collectors, fair enough. But it's different. It was different at the time of Jesus. The Jews were under Roman occupation. They hated the Romans, okay? This was like if the Nazis were in Canada, after, during World War I, if they made World War II, if they made it over, they took over Canada, it would be like living under the Nazis. We hate the Nazis. Well, one of the reasons that somebody takes over territory is that they can tax them. Well, the Romans, they weren't stupid. So they said, well, we can go around and try to tax all the, get all the money from our enemies, people that hate us. Or what we'll do is we'll get them to tax themselves and give us the money. So how do you do it? Well, this is what you do. You say, okay, so this territory here, we'll sell it to somebody who wants to cut the taxes on everything. So they basically had an auction. So somebody would bid, thank you very much, Father. No, it's not taxing. I'll take it. So they would auction off this area and say, who wants to cut taxes? And so we'll say, well, I'll cut taxes and I'll pay $1,000 for the right to cut taxes from these people. Now I'll pay, $1,200, thank you, $1,200 to cut taxes from these people. So the Jews, some of the Jews would actually bid on the right to tax their own people. So Matthew wasn't just a tax collector. He was a tax collector who was taxing his own people and giving the money to who? To the enemy. The Romans, which really made him beloved in his community. In addition to that, unlike today when you go to pay your taxes, they say 27% or 14% or whatever it is. In Jesus' time, in Matthew's time, there's no sort of set amount. So what the tax collectors do, they try to get as much as they could. Why? Well, because they only had to give the Romans $1,000 or whatever it is, 1,000. If they could get 1,100, then they had 100 extra. If they could get 1,500. 500 extra. So they weren't just taxing their own people and giving it to the enemy. They were overtaxing their own people, lining their pockets, and giving it to the enemy. So the question is, how popular would Matthew have been? I mean, we've heard in Scripture, he was unpopular because he was a tax collector, but it wasn't just the taxes. He would have been a cheater, and he would have been supporting the enemy, the people that the Jews wanted to get rid of. So Matthew, who was a Jew, is doing this. He would be the most unpopular guy in town. Nobody would have liked him. So why would he do this? Why would Matthew pick an occupation where he rips off his own people, supports the enemy, and basically, his family, his friends, and everybody else would think that he is awful? Well, he did it for one reason. He did it because he thought he'd get rich. He did it because he wanted to get, because tax collectors made a lot of money because they got 500 here and then 500 here. And he did great. Now, okay, so Matthew wanted to be wealthy. Why would Matthew want to be wealthy? Well, for one reason. The same reason I ate 15 Nanaimo bars. Because he wanted to be happy. Every decision you have ever made, you have made because you thought it would make you happy. That's just a universal human principle. Everything we do because we think it will make us happy. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Now you're thinking, okay, Michael, well, I want to be happy. Why did I do the dishes tonight? I said, I don't know. You should have come out for dinner with us. Father is paying. Well, if Father is paying, then he'd be harping on us to tithe more the next Sunday, so I don't want to do that. No. Why did you do the dishes tonight? Because you had two options. Three options. One option was to do the dishes tonight before you came, and then go home and have a nice clean kitchen. The other option was to get home, tonight at 8 o'clock, and then or 8:30, then do dishes. Or the other option is just to leave them and wake up in the morning and do the dishes in the morning. Because we all love waking up to a sink full of dirty dishes, right? No. So what you thought was, well, I don't want to do dishes at all, but it's best if I do them now, because I certainly don't want to wake up tomorrow to a bunch of dirty dishes. So even in doing the dishes tonight, you did it because you thought overall it would make you happy. Every single thing we do We think, we hope, we want to make something. You never do anything that you intentionally think will make you unhappy. This is an awful movie and I'm miserable every time I watch it. I think I'll look at it. No, even if it's an awful movie that makes you miserable, you hope maybe this time there will be some redeeming quality to it. Because like me and like everybody else, you want to be happy. And that's why Matthew made those sacrifices. Because Matthew wanted to be happy, and he thought the pathway to that happiness was wealth. And look at the sacrifices he made. I mean, he made sacrifices for it that were immense. Now, as I said, wealth in itself isn't bad. It's not being rich or being poor that makes us good or virtuous or not virtuous. If you've seen the movie or read the book Les Miserables, there was a recent new movie that came out about a year ago or less than a year ago. And it's wonderful. And the main character, Jean Valjean, he's rich. He has this incredible factory that he runs, and he's super rich. But he's very generous, isn't he? He's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful man, who's gone through this deep conversion, and he's generous, and he's kind, and he's merciful. And then there's this other family, if you've seen it, the Thénardiers. They're the ones that watch over Cosette when she's a baby. And they're dirt poor, and they're miserable, wretched, evil. They're horrible, horrible people. These are the worst kind. So, in the movie, you can see clearly that someone can be wealthy, be a very good, generous, holy person. We can be dirt poor and be a miserable wretch. So again, it's not about whether we're rich or poor. That's not the question. The question is, where do we put our priorities? What is it that we pursue primarily with our life? See, the problem is, are we pursuing God? Are we pursuing Him with our whole heart and mind? What is it that we think will make us happy? See, one of the things that pursuing wealth, and it's not that we shouldn't provide for our families or anything, but that wealth becomes the priority. One of the reasons for that is we think that it will take away risk. Father talked about the importance of risking. But if we have all the money in the world, then we don't have to worry about risk, because we don't have to trust that God will provide for us. So we can take care of ourselves. We've got lots of money, we've got the rainy day account, we've got the house and the car and this and that, we've got everything we need to make sure that we can get by without ever having to trust in God. Now, it's true that we shouldn't be unnecessarily dependent on other people. I was at dinner a couple months ago, and there was a gentleman there, and he was saying, it was at breakfast actually, he said, my daughter's moving out. And someone said, well, how old's your daughter? And he said, 27. There's kind of this awkward silence, right? Because we don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? And then he kind of picked it up and he said, oh no, it's a good thing. It's like, yeah, other 27-year-olds can't live at home, but it's generally a good thing that they start kind of moving out. It's fine for them to depend on parents for a while, but at some point, it's good for children to sort of fend for themselves, put gas in the car themselves, buy groceries, pay bills, get a job, these sorts of things. At the same time, our culture has taught us, don't be dependent on anybody. Be independent and just provide for yourself. I think sometimes when we do that, we take away opportunities for others to love us. Think of my grandma. She was in her late 90s, living on her own, and she wouldn't accept any help. She wouldn't allow her 5 children to provide meals for her or do her laundry, because that would be such a big burden on them. Because who wants to care for their 97-year-old mother anyway? They would have loved to have done it. She said, guys, I need a bit of help. Absolutely. I'll take Monday, Tuesday, boom, no problem. But no. Well, she couldn't live on her own like that. I mean, she was a great woman, but she was 98. So she had to be moved out of her house. And it struck me that had she not kind of had this fierce independence, she could have stayed in her home longer. She could have allowed her children to express their love for her in a whole new way. I think sometimes this gets translated into our relationship with God, that wealth can become a security for us. But the truth is that sickness and tragedy and disease, they come to all of us. And what happens to us? What happens if our assurance, if our security is found in God, is found in wealth, and that's all wiped away? Sometimes we make that mistake. Sometimes we think, if I just get the right education, if I just get the right job, if I just have this much in my rainy day account, or this much here, or this much there, then I'll be happy. If I just get the latest iPhone, because the 4S and the 5, they're good, but they're not good. If I just got this 5, whatever it is, if I just got a nicer car, or a nicer this, or a nicer, if I just had that, then I'd be happy. And you are happier for about 3 days. It's true. Someone gave me a phone about 2 weeks ago. I never had an iPhone before. Someone had it sitting in their basement. It's a long story. He's like, I'm paying for this. I'm not using it. Do you want it? I'm like, sure. I was on cloud nine for about 2 days. I got a new vehicle. My old vehicle was, it was time for the trash bin in the summer. I was so happy it lasted 5 days. And I was just like, I'm right kind of where I was before. Why is that? It's because the longing of our heart is infinite. I have a friend who has a 5-year-old son, and he was talking to his dad one day, and he said, Dad, I want to build something. And the dad said, well, William, what do you want to build? He said, something permanent. Yeah, that's right, of course you do. That is a deep spiritual intuition in that child. Because he recognizes in some ways we're made for eternity, for permanence, for infinity. And so there's nothing in this world that fills our heart enough. And we try these little things. Like, imagine trying to replace a person with a picture. So I love my wife, I love my daughter. But imagine I was like, you know what? I got the iPhone, now I got pictures of them. What? I got a video, I got pictures, what do I need them for anymore? I'm just going to, go, live as a monk down in Tennessee somewhere and look at the pictures whenever I get lonely. No matter how many pictures or videos you have, it never replaces the person. Or it's like if you're hungry and you smell a good meal, you never say, I'm so hungry. Oh, the schnitzel is so good. I'm not hungry anymore. I'm satisfied. Oh, you're not. You're starving now. You want it even more. You're like, where's the schnitzel? Yeah. Because it almost whets the appetite. We think if we get the latest toy, the little gizmo, the better this, the better that, we'll be happy. My brother is a medical doctor. He lives in Sault Ste. Marie. And he's worked really, really hard. He's worked really hard his whole life. He's one of the hardest workers I know. He's amazing. He's earned every penny, but he's got a lot of pennies. So, he and his wife, they designed their own house. They got it custom built. It is beautiful. Beautiful. They have one child. They're a bit older, so that's the only child in the house. So there's just the 3 of them and the dog. And he said to me, I went up there to see his house. Well, I went up there, and I didn't go just to see the house, but I went up to see him, and I saw the house. And, it's gorgeous. So he says, what my dream is? He said, I want someone to come to me and say, I love your house, I just want to buy it. He said, because then, the thing about the house is I like it, but there's a few things I have to do differently, right? I move this wall here, I make this bigger, I change this room, I put in this flooring, I have this color. And he said, I wish I could just start over and change those 2 or 3 or 5 little things that aren't quite perfect. What would happen if someone did that? He'd do that, he'd build his house, and then what would happen? Oh, I just wish someone would come about, because there's still a couple things. Okay, his house is bigger than his garage is bigger than my house. His garage is 1,200 square feet, mine's 950. You could plot my whole house in his garage. There's 3 of them and a dog, okay? And I'm like, dude, your house is gorgeous. I know, but it's not perfect. Why? Because he has an infinite desire. That's why. He loves his house, and he should. But it's never going to make him happy. It's never going to fill that deep desire. I think of Steve Jobs. I was reading about Steve Jobs today for a different reason, but when Steve Jobs was dying, Steve Jobs was the president of Apple. He was worth billions of dollars, respected all over the place. And we knew he had cancer and he was dying. He was dying quickly. And I remember thinking to myself, did having billions and billions of dollars, did that help him prepare for the moment before his death? Did that help him prepare for the moment of his death? And did that help to prepare him for the moment after his death? You know, did having billions and billions of dollars make him to be a holy man? Did it help to draw him closer to God? Did it open him up to depending on divine providence? There's a rather haunting scripture. Jesus told him this parable. The land of a rich man brought forth plentiful, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is he who lays up treasures for himself, but is not rich towards God. We have a fundamental choice. Where will our treasure be? Will it be in the pursuit of material things in this world? Or will it be in pursuit of communion with God? And here's an interesting thing to think of. That true wealth means having a great deal. And what is it that God wants for us? God wants to give us himself. That's what heaven is. If we give our hearts to God, we're imperfect, we sin, we fall down, we go to confession, we pick our, God picks us back up. But if we pursue God, if we give him our yes, if we respond to him, we try to live in friendship with him, he welcomes us into his kingdom. And he gives his very life to us so we can possess him. The greatest riches, the greatest wealth is God himself who fills that infinite desire. That's what he wants to give us. And if we spend our lives saying no to God, instead focusing solely on the things of this world, pushing them away, what happens? Then we spend all eternity separated from him in the grace and poverty because we have lost the one thing that fills our souls. And so at the end of the day, it's not that God wants us to be poor. It's that God has a greater wealth to give us. God has a greater wealth than my brother's 3,800 square foot house. He has a better wealth than 10 iPhones. He's a better wealth, or a greater wealth, than a cubic meter of gold. He's not interested in tiny, valueless things like that. He wants to give us himself. And so therefore, wealth is a double lie. It's a lie, number one, because it tells you that it can satisfy you, and it can't. And it's also a lie because it's not true wealth. It's not nearly enough. God has made us for something much greater. And so when Matthew, who spent his life pursuing wealth, comes face to face with Jesus, he hears the call, follow me. He stands up and follows Jesus. The second idol that we pursue instead of pursuing God is honor. Now for this I'd like to meditate for a few minutes on the baptism of Jesus. Jesus comes, the River Jordan. Jesus comes. Jesus, the Son of God. God himself, second person of the Blessed Trinity, comes before John the Baptist. This guy, with a big beard and bees and honey and stuff flying all over the place. And, just out of the wilderness. And Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, the anointed one of Israel, says, hey, John, will you baptize me? And John's like, no, this is not on. Jesus insists. So he baptizes. It's this incredible scene where God is humbling himself before man. Jesus is worthy of all honor. I mean, there's nothing greater than God. He's the Son of God. He's the man. But the story of Jesus is a story of humbling and humility all the way through. I mean, first of all, he's born in a stable. He's laid in a manger. The manger is what the animals eat out of. It's dirty. Okay, so we've got to put God somewhere, so let's find a dirty thing that the animals eat out of. Let's just put him there. And then he's got to flee to Egypt. with his family so he's not slaughtered. And then he comes back to his town and he lives there for 30 years. And he hangs out with his friends and he makes a few chairs and tables and, he does, goes to the synagogue and all these sorts of things. Nobody knows who he is. Who is this? We know who this Jesus is. He's from Nazareth. We know who his parents are, Mary and Joseph. What's the big deal with this guy? 30 years the Son of God walks almost silently throughout the world. He who is worthy of all worship, all honor, all praise. Now, there is in society a right ordering of things. There is a hierarchy that, it's good for the private to respect the general. It's good for the student to respect the teacher. It's good for the teacher to respect the principal. It's good for the principal to respect the superintendent. It's good for children to respect parents and parents to respect their parents. There's a proper hierarchy in that sense. And it's a good thing. But behind all those things are just people. Like if you've ever met, when you're 40, you meet someone who was your teacher. Like, it's different than when you were in grade 2. Someone was telling me today, was it you, Father? No. Someone was telling me about, it was Deacon Ken, that you taught somebody that I know, right, in grade 8. That's what the story was. But now that man, he's a man, he's grown up. And there's a bit of a different type of interaction. Because the truth is, Deacon Ken and that man are just two men before God. So behind all the titles and all the uniforms and all of this, we're just children of God. But we often define ourselves by these things. We define ourselves by our honors. What do we want people to think of us? We want people to think we're smart. Nobody wants to be thought of as dumb. We want to be thought as confident. Nobody wants to be seen as insecure. We want to be seen as good-looking. Nobody wants to be ugly. We want to be friendly. Nobody wants to be seen as mean. We want to be funny. Nobody wants to be seen as dour and miserable. We want all these things. No, not me. No. We want others to sing our praise. And we want the world to recognize that we're important and we matter. And sometimes the world does. Sometimes the world gives us sort of this, we're recognized, we're honored. But we know these are passing. There's three problems. They're fleeting. Honors are fleeting. They're unimportant and they're not who we are. Let me give you a very simple example. Looks. Everybody wants to look good. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be beautiful and taking care of ourselves, and combing our hair, and showering. I'm not suggesting we don't have John the Baptist. But it's putting our hope in our good looks. But good looks are fleeting. Any of the ladies here ever remember MacGyver from in the 80s? The show MacGyver. Oh, he was so handsome back then, right? Dean something was the actor's name. He was 25. If you've seen him, know what he looks like your average 55-year-old. No offense to any 55-year-old men here, but not as much dark hair up here and a little bit more insulation down here. He was the stud, right? But now he's just like, none of us look as good as we looked 10 years ago. Most of us, at least, don't look as good as we did 10 years ago. That's just life. That passes away. How important are our looks? Like, do we want friends that like us just because we have the right proportion of jaw, or we have the right shaped nose, and the right color eyes, and the right skin here, and the right skin there? I spoke at Journey to the Father, which many of you are familiar with, this past summer. And I didn't hear this, but someone told me secondhand there was a girl who gave a testimony. And she said something, so this is like third hand now, but she said, someone once said to her, "Oh, you could be a model if it wasn't for your face." Isn't that awful? That's a horrible thing to say to someone. But here, let me ask you, why is that so cruel? And this isn't. You could be a pilot if it wasn't for your eyes. You could be an engineer if it wasn't for your multiplication skills. I mean, really, what's more important? Having good eyes and being able to do math, or having the right geometry in your job? Probably good eyes, if we really sat down and were very reasonable about it. You could be beautiful and blind, or you could be mediocre and have the best eyesight in the world. I think most of us would take eyesight. I don't know. It's nice to know what 3 times 6 is. But it's interesting that not being great at math or not having great eyesight doesn't really kind of, we're not quite as worried about that as things like our looks. Because we think that they'll bring us the happiness that our hearts crave for. Finally, they don't define us. Is there nothing more to us than that? What about our personality? What about who we are? What about who we are? Isn't that what's most important? But we get caught up. I'm the exact same way. I spend my life doing public speaking, right? So I'm like, feigning false humility. People, I enjoy, thanks so much. We find in all sorts of places. I know one church that my in-laws go to, and there's a gentleman who used to carry the book of the Gospels, in the procession in. And there was a guy in the parish that got ordained a deacon. So one Sunday the deacon was there, and he said, I'm the deacon, so I carry the book of the Gospels. Oh, the other guy, he was so furious that he didn't get to be in the parade. He was involved in 3 different ministries in the church. He quit them all. If I can't be the guy in the parade with the red book, I'm out here. Really? Well, goodbye. I don't mean that for real, but I think this is the big deal. We find the funniest things. But here's the irony. I live in a really busy street now. So there's people walking back and forth all the time. If you just kind of look at people out my window, it looks like everyone's got it together. They got so much confidence, they're just like, do. But the irony is we've never had a time. There's been so many psychologists and psychiatrists and life coaches and gurus and counselors and therapists and mentors. If we're all so darn together and so happy, why do we need all these things? Now, I'm not saying those are bad. Quite the opposite. That we need them because somehow we don't know who we are. We've tried to find our identity in all sorts of passing, fleeting, and unimportant things. And while we can have the best looks and the best shoes and the biggest house, there's a question that when we're honest with ourselves, we hear, who am I? Am I good? I mean, not am I good at this or am I good at that? Not do people like me, but am I good? Am I a good person? Am I loved? Am I loved by God? How much? How much am I loved by God? Does God think, is it some people think, well, God's just so awesome that even though I'm a rotten, awful person, God just still loves me. No, that's not how it is. God doesn't love bad things. God loves you a lot. God, you know what, everyone has junk in our life. We have sin, we have woundedness, we have past histories, we have mistakes, all that stuff, But that's not who we are. And that's what God sees when God looks at us. Here's the interesting thing with the baptism of Jesus. As Jesus humbles himself, what happens? God the Father exalts him. God the Father says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." The Father reveals the identity of Jesus. And the same is true for us. That we want to find our identity in all these different things. In our education, in our wealth, in our good looks, in our athletic capacities, and all these things. But God says, no. I want to tell you who you are. I want to show you who you are. And who are we? Well, we're the same as Jesus, in a sense. We are the beloved sons and daughters of God. That's the primary identity of you and me. Son and daughter of God. When John Paul II came to World Youth Day in Toronto, he said to the youth, but it's true for all of us, we are not the sum of our weaknesses and failures. We are the sum of the Father's love for us and of our real capacity to become the image of his Son. See, it's just like with wealth. It's not like God saying, try to be famous or try to, worry about, we get honors from this or that. That's too much, No, God's saying that's not enough. It's not enough to be Miss Universe. It's not enough to be, the best baseball player ever. It's not enough to be that's not enough for you. You're greater than that. You are a son and daughter of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Think of Prince William. Okay? The only reason Prince William is famous is because of his grandma. I mean, no offense to Prince William. I don't know if there's any royals here. You can, help me afterwards. But he's not He's smart enough, he's not a genius. He's fit enough, but he would never have been a famous soccer player. He's kind of mean. He's not a Brad Pitt. You know, Kate didn't marry him because of his looks. Okay, he would never. If he wasn't the crown king, he wouldn't be married to Kate Middleton. But who he is defined by who his dad is, the prince, and who his parents are, the prince and the queen. We have, the queen is fine, but she's just the queen of England. Our Father is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. We have an immeasurably greater dignity in virtue of that than any royalty would ever have. And here's the interesting thing. That if we spend our life pursuing honors in this world, trying to define ourselves apart from who we truly are, we push God out. We ignore, we refuse to hear his voice as he wishes to speak in the silence of our hearts who we are. And if we do that our whole life, then God will allow us to push him away for eternity. And we suffer the great dishonor of being invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb, having refused to join. But if we spend our life living out of who we truly are as his sons and daughters, then when we pass from this earthly life, God will bestow upon us, as Paul says, a crown of glory. Why a crown? Because we're royalty. Because we're a kid of the king. And so as we set aside earthly honors and receive our true honor, our true identity, we're preparing our souls for communion with God forever. So, like Jesus, we are called to humble ourselves, to set aside the honors of this world, to allow God to reveal who we truly are. Wealth, honor, and the last one for the night, power. For this one, I'd like to reflect on the scene of Jesus before Pontius Pilate. Many of you have probably seen The Passion of the Christ, and this is a very vivid and rich scene in that movie. Jesus has been scourged, so he's standing on the right side of Pilate, and he's got his hands bound, and he's all bloodied up. Pilate's there, not sure what to do. And then Barabbas comes out, and Barabbas kind of, one of the eyes all weird, and he's missing teeth, and he looks like a crazy man. And in the movie, what happens is, Pilate says, "Who do you want me to release?" Which is what happened in Scripture. And the Jews say, "Barabbas, Barabbas." So he lets Barabbas go. And in the movie, Barabbas thinks they love him, but they're like, oh, they're disgusted by him. Like, this is just a crazy man. What he's trying to show in the movie is how much they hated Jesus in order to want Barabbas. And it's an interesting, it's kind of an interesting artistic way of expressing it. But I was reading something that Pope Benedict wrote in his book, Jesus of Nazareth, that paints a slightly different picture, and I found terrifically insightful. The first thing he said is that the modern translations of the Bible say that Barabbas was a robber. He says actually what he really was a rebel, was an insurrectionist. So what was Barabbas rebelling against? Against the Romans. He was probably trying to overthrow the Romans, which means the Jews would have loved him. He would have been a hero, because he's trying to get rid of it would be like someone that's trying to get rid of the Nazis and gets caught and he's put in jail. He'd kind of be like a little bit of a hero for us. So the first thing isn't that Barabbas was kind of this lunatic. Barabbas was probably a very beloved, well-respected Jew who was trying to overthrow the Romans. And the second thing that Pope pointed out is the name Barabbas. Bar means son, so we have Simon Bar Jonah, means son of Jonah. So it's son of who? Abbas. What does Abba mean? It means father, that's right. So what was Barabbas' name, literally? Son of the Father. Now, this wasn't his real name. This was a title. It's like Lady Gaga. It's not a real name. Your dad's name is Gaga. It's like Mr. Gaga. So let's name our daughter Lady. Her name's probably like, whatever. Whatever. June Smith or something. Who knows what it is? I don't know what it is. And she took it as a stage name. Barabbas is a name, it would be like a stage name. It's like the great one for Gretzky. So here, think of it this way, we have a very interesting contrast going on in the scene. On the one side, we have someone who is called Son of the Father. On the other side, we have someone who is the Son of the Father. On one side, we have someone who wants to destroy the enemy, the Romans. Destroy the enemy, overcome oppression, and set the people free. And he's going to do it through the violent overthrow of the Romans. And on the other side, we have someone who truly wants to destroy the enemy, who wants to overcome oppression, who wants to set the people free. And he will do it through violence as well. He will do it through allowing violence to be inflicted upon him. And so we come to the third temptation, which is the temptation to power. Like wealth, honor, power is not bad. Someone has to be in charge. Someone has to make it. It's good that there's a general in the army. But it's when we pursue power instead for our security, rather than giving our heart fully over to God. See, the problem with power, just like the other idols, is that power makes a promise that it can't deliver. It says you can appropriate, you can take anything you want. So if you want to be happy, just take whatever you want. You can take all the cars you want, all the chocolate bars you want, all the houses you want, all the money you want. You can take anything you want. But here's the problem with power. The one thing that makes us happy is unconditional love. And love, to be love, has to be free. You can't force love from anybody. I take one of you guys, I pull a pistol, I put a gun in your head, a pistol in your head, I say, do you love me? Oh yes, Michael. You're wonderful. You're so handsome and tall. Oh, I'm rich, yeah. At 124 pounds, I'm just tall. But you'll say anything. You'll give me all the love in the world that I want. What's the problem? It doesn't mean anything. It's not love if it's not free. So the one thing that our hearts crave more than anything is love. And the one thing power does is make it impossible for people to love us. So the one thing that power thinks it is going to get, it can't get it. It makes it impossible because love must be given freely. Now, I'd like to do a bit of I'd like to apply this to this idea of unconditional love to God. We want to pursue God at a distance. We want to be safe in our relationship with Him. Because we're a little bit worried. And here's what we're afraid of. Let's be honest. We can all be honest here, okay? What happens in Cornwall stays in Cornwall, okay? I told you my sins, now it's your turn. Deep in our heart, this is what we're afraid of. If we let God into our life too much, He'll make us miserable. He'll ask something of us that we don't want to give. Something that's not good. Something that's not good for us. He'll ask me to go here or do this or be this or forgive that person or be generous in this way or quit my job and move somewhere else or try to reconcile or do this. And that will make me miserable. So we gotta be careful with God, because sometimes God gets a bit overexcited and He asks a bit too much of us. I'm working on it, but think of the 3-year-old. There's no offense to any present company here, because I know there's a few munchkins running around. There's no one that seeks power more than the 3-year-old. Because the 3-year-old, they've got it down. They know what they want to eat, when they want to eat it, when they want to go to bed, and what they want to do. And the parent that lets the 3-year-old exercise power over all things turns him into a tyrant. I mean, 3-year-olds can be tyrants. If you've met them, I'm sure. You're thinking, what's the area you're thinking of? Children, grandchildren, kids down in their classes, kids down the street. Because the kid says, I want to eat ice cream and nothing else. And the parent who is mean and cruel and wants to test them says, no, you have to eat vegetables. Why? Because parents are mean. And it's a big test. Let's see if the child will obey. And then the child says, I don't want to go to sleep tonight. And the parents say, no, you have to. Why? Because we're cruel. We want to test you. We want to see if you'll bow down and obey. And then the child says, I don't want to go to school. Tough luck, sucker. You got to go. Why? Because it's awful. That's why. Is that what a loving parent does? Or maybe the parent says, no, you can't eat ice cream because it's not good for you. How do you know it's not good for me? I think it's good. Well, you've got to trust me on this one. See, the parent refuses to let the child eat ice cream all the time. Not because the child doesn't think it's good. The child is convinced, absolutely convinced, the best thing for them is ice cream. But the parent knows something the child doesn't know. And the child wants to stay up all night. They're convinced, I won't be grumpy in the morning, I promise. You're already grumpy. It's only 8:30. I won't whine. You're whining right now. No. The parent knows, even though the child wants to stay up all night, even though the child is convinced this is the best thing in the world for me, I will be happier than you could ever imagine, they won't be. So the parent doesn't let them do it. Why? Because it's not good for them. You know what else children want to do? They want to put their face in the hot burner. And some parents are so tyrannical and cruel that they won't even let their kids near the hot burner. Why? Because they're testing them. Because they have arbitrary rules that they've made up to see if their children will obey. No. They have rules they set up because they're concerned about their children having a permanent circular scar on their cheek. See, we think God's like a tyrannical parent saying, you can't eat ice cream all the time, and you can't go to bed when you want to, you can't put your face on the hot burner because I'm testing you. And we, like the 3-year-old, oh God, you don't want me to be happy, you're going to make my life miserable. No, God sees what we don't see. God knows better than us. God sees further than us. God made us. He knows what's good for us. So we kind of follow that distance. We kind of keep him not too close. Why? Because we're afraid. We want to have power in this relationship because we're afraid if we let go of that, God will make us unhappy. And the one desire of God's heart is to make us happy. The whole moral law isn't about arbitrary rules testing us. It's about God knowing what's best for us. It doesn't always feel like it. I've had times in my life when I'm like, I do not understand why this is wrong. And now some of those things, I can see much more clearly than I did. So we ask ourselves, do we view God as the law-giving tyrant who can't entirely be trusted? Is there an element of that in your view of God the Father? I mean, none of us probably think of him as a tyrant, but do we sometimes act like we're afraid that he would be if we let him in too much? Do we view God as tender and loving? Do we trust that he wants nothing but what's best for us? Do we think that his heart beats with love for us? This is a tremendous challenge for us in our society today, because our society, we want to create reality. We want to determine what's good and what's evil. The problem with trying to determine what's good and evil is that's like trying to determine what's edible and what's not. You can't. Some things are edible, some things aren't. It doesn't matter how much the dog wants your slipper to be edible. It's not. We don't create reality. We live in accord with it. We don't determine what's good and evil. We accept that. And we accept it as the loving plan of a Father who wants nothing but the best for us. God made us for communion with him. Through our sin, through the sin of others, that has been wounded. That has been broken. We sometimes think, I'm going to keep God out of the picture. I'm going to just kind of work my way up myself. I can take care of my life myself. I don't need him to come back into my life. And so in a certain way, in an analogous way, we want to kind of fight our way through this life and on the road to salvation. And that's what Brad was wanting to do. Barabbas wanted to destroy the enemy, set the people free, and he was going to do it through violently overthrowing the Romans. That's like us. That's an analogy for us, fighting our way through this world, doing it our way, thinking if we have enough power, we can make it all work. But the world's wrong about power. And sometimes we're wrong about power. Because the greatest power in the world is to love sacrificially. To give ourselves fully over to another. Because if our greatest desire is to be loved, then our greatest capacity is to love. And so, in Jesus, we see true power manifested as he gives his life for the world. And so, we have the choice. Who will we follow in this world? Will we follow Barabbas, who will his way to salvation? Or will we follow Christ, who will offer himself sacrificially for our salvation? Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Michael. As you leave church today, there will be envelopes on a table on both sides at the entrance. These are to support Michael in his mission. As he mentioned, he is a lay minister. This is how he funds himself and supports himself and the family, is by his sharing his faith with others, and then we have the opportunity of sharing with him through our collection.